The humid August air hung thick and heavy over Officer Alex Miller's patrol car, even with the AC blasting. Another sweltering shift in the sprawling suburbs of Maple Creek, a town where the biggest crimes usually involved misplaced garden gnomes, or teenagers with slightly too loud car stereos. Alex gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, a silent tension humming beneath her calm exterior. 6 months into her new precinct, and even longer since she'd found herself truly at home. Not since the divorce. She'd moved into the modest bungalow on Oakwood Lane hoping for quiet, for anonymity, a place to simply be. Maple Creek had offered that. Mostly. Then there was Karen. Alex stifled a sigh as the dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio. Unit 212, domestic disturbance. Repeat, domestic disturbance, 432 Oakwood Lane. Caller reports excessive noise and suspicious activity from adjacent property. Advise caution, caller sounds highly agitated. Alex's brow furrowed. 432 Oakwood. That was Karen Jenkins' address. Alex's own house was 430. The adjacent property was hers. A jolt went through her, sharp and unwelcome. This wasn't the first time Karen had reported vague nuisances. A barking dog, a delivery truck idling too long, the sound of her lawnmower on a Saturday morning, all had at some point been deemed worthy of a phone call to the non-emergency line, usually routed through dispatch as a minor complaint. But domestic disturbance and suspicious activity, that was a new escalation. Her heart rate picked up, a familiar beat of annoyance mixed with a rising tide of professional duty. She was on duty. This was a call. She had to respond. Responding, she reported, her voice steady and even, betraying none of the turmoil brewing within her. She flipped on her lights, not the siren. This wasn't an emergency, but protocol demanded visible response. The patrol car glided down the tree-lined street, past immaculate lawns and the silent judgment of well-maintained homes. As she pulled up, the sight was exactly what she'd expected. Karen Jenkins, a woman in her late 50s with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob and a perpetually aggrieved expression, was already on her porch, arms crossed, tapping a foot with impatient fury. She wore a pristine peach-colored tracksuit, as if expecting to jog straight into a neighborhood watch meeting after this. Her gaze, sharp and accusatory, was fixed not on Alex's house, but on Alex's patrol car. Alex parked neatly at the curb, put the car in park, and took a deep breath. Time to switch hats. The private homeowner, the woman who just wanted peace, had to vanish. Only Officer Alex Miller remained. She opened the door, the familiar scent of vinyl and stale coffee from her cruiser wafting out. The afternoon sun beat down, instantly making her uniform feel heavy, hot. She smoothed down her shirt, adjusted her belt, and strode with purpose towards Karen's porch. "Afternoon, ma'am," Alex said, her voice calm, authoritative, but not aggressive. She kept her hands visible, open, a posture of de-escalation. "Officer Miller, you called 911? Karen's eyes, the color of watery blue, darted over Alex's uniform, then up to her face. A flicker of something crossed them. Recognition? Dismissal? It was hard to tell. "Finally! What took you so long? I called over 5 minutes ago. Don't you people understand the urgency?" Alex kept her expression neutral. "Ma'am, I just received the dispatch. What's the nature of the emergency?" Karen huffed, gesturing wildly towards Alex's own house with a manicured hand. "The nature of the emergency, officer, is them. That person next door. They're at it again. The noise, the shouting, the constant coming and going. It's a menace. It's disturbing the peace. I can't even enjoy my afternoon tea without their ruckus." Alex followed Karen's frantic gaze. Her own house. The windows were shut. The curtains were drawn. There was no noise, no ruckus, just the quiet hum of her own air conditioner, probably, barely audible. Alex lived alone. There was no them, no shouting, no constant coming and going beyond her leaving for work and coming home. "Ma'am," Alex began, trying to inject a dose of reality into the theatrical performance unfolding before her. "Could you specify what kind of noise and—" "Who are they?" Karen scoffed, her face twisting into a mask of indignation. "Who are they? Don't play dumb, officer. The person who lives there, the new one, the one who moved in 6 months ago and clearly has no respect for anyone else in this community." She jabbed a finger, almost violently, in the direction of Alex's front door. "They're a disturbance. I want them removed. I want them issued a notice. I want them to understand that this is a quiet neighborhood and we don't tolerate their shenanigans." Alex felt a slow, cold dread begin to creep up her spine, mingling with a burgeoning anger she fought hard to suppress. The new one, 6 months ago, her. This was Karen's new tactic. She wasn't just complaining about noise. She was trying to get her removed from her own property. "Ma'am, when you say removed, are you implying a trespasser?" Alex asked, her voice dropping slightly, the professional edge sharpening. She needed to establish the legal grounds Karen believed she had, if any. Trespasser. Nuisance. Whatever. "You want to call it!" Karen cried, stepping closer, her voice rising in pitch. "They're not supposed to be here. This neighborhood is for respectable people. I've been here 20 years. I know the kind of people who belong. And they—" She paused, her eyes narrowing as they finally focused on Alex's face, really looked at her. "They certainly don't fit in." A beat of silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken accusations. Karen's gaze flickered from Alex's eyes down to her name tag, then to the badge on her chest. Her mouth, previously a tight, angry line, softened into a slight, almost imperceptible frown. A glimmer of confusion, then dawning realization, began to spread across her features. Alex met Karen's gaze, unflinching. She felt her muscles tense, every fiber of her being screaming at her to drop the professional facade, to unleash the torrent of frustration that had been building for months. But she was a cop. Here. Now. She was Officer Miller. "Ma'am," Alex said, her voice now flat, devoid of any warmth, a chillingly calm tone that cut through Karen's escalating tirade. "You called 911 because you believe the occupant of 430 Oakwood Lane is causing a domestic disturbance and engaging in suspicious activity. Is that correct?" Karen blinked, her earlier bluster deflating slightly as her eyes widened. "Yes, that's exactly what I said. Are you deaf or just incompetent?" Alex ignored the insult. Her gaze was locked onto Karen's, a silent challenge. "And you want them removed from the property, as in physically ejected from their residence?" "Yes, exactly. They don't belong here. I want them out," Karen shrieked, her voice regaining its shrill edge. She was still fighting, but there was a tremor in her voice now, a faint uncertainty. She was starting to see it. The pieces were connecting for her too. The badge, the name tag, the face. Alex took a deliberate step closer, her shadow falling, over Karen's manicured porch. "Ma'am," she said, her voice now barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of steel. "I am Officer Alex Miller. My name is on my badge. My house number is 430 Oakwood Lane." Karen's jaw dropped. The carefully constructed facade of outrage crumbled, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. Her eyes, wide and disbelieving, darted from Alex's face to her badge, then across the lawn to the house number clearly displayed on the mailbox next to Alex's own front door. The peach tracksuit seemed to sag, the perfectly coiffed hair suddenly looking disheveled. You, Karen stammered, her voice thin, reedy. "You're the neighbor?" "That's correct, ma'am," Alex said, a ghost of a smile touching the corner of her lips. But it was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just trapped its prey. "And as an officer of the law, responding to your 911 call about suspicious activity and a domestic disturbance at my own residence. I'm now obligated to conduct a thorough investigation." Karen took a stumbling step back, her face paling. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving them ashen. The confidence that had buoyed her throughout the incident evaporated, replaced by a sudden, chilling fear. She had not just called the police on her neighbor. She had called the police on a police officer, on duty, and that officer was her. Alex raised an eyebrow, her voice losing its whisper, now carrying the crisp, official tone of an officer who had just found a violation. "False reporting to 911, ma'am, especially a frivolous or harassing call, is a serious offense. It ties up emergency services, prevents them from responding to real emergencies. It carries significant penalties, including fines and potential jail time." Karen's eyes darted around, looking for an escape, a way out of the corner she had painted herself into. Her carefully cultivated image of the aggrieved, upstanding citizen was shattering around her. She had weaponized the system, only to find the weapon pointed back at her. I just meant," Karen stammered, her words trailing off into an incoherent mumble. Alex stepped onto the first porch step, closing the distance between them. Her posture was still professional, but her presence was now overwhelmingly authoritative. "And harassing a neighbor, ma'am, falls under the umbrella of disturbing the peace and could even be construed as stalking, depending on the pattern of behavior. I believe this isn't the first time you've made such complaints regarding my property. Is that correct?" Karen was speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The air between Officer Alex Miller and Karen Jenkins hummed with a palpable tension, thick and suffocating. Karen's breath hitched, her carefully composed features contorted into a grotesque mask of shock and disbelief. Her mouth worked, but no sound emerged beyond a faint, guttural croak. The peach tracksuit, once a symbol of her suburban dominion, now seemed to sag around her, emphasizing her sudden vulnerability. "Ma'am, I'm waiting for your identification," Alex repeated, her voice cutting through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. She kept her notepad raised, pen poised, an unwavering monument to protocol. This wasn't just about Karen anymore. This was about procedure, about demonstrating that even though this was personal, Alex was a professional first. Every move, every word had to be by the book. Karen finally found her voice, a thin, wavering whisper. "This is outrageous. You can't do this! This is my house! You're harassing me!" Alex's eyebrow arched, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. "On the contrary, ma'am, you initiated this interaction by calling emergency services under false pretenses and making accusations against a property and its occupant. I am responding to a 911 call. As the responding officer, I am legally obligated to investigate the claims made. And as the alleged occupant causing a domestic disturbance, I am equally obligated to protect myself from frivolous and potentially malicious accusations." Her voice was still calm, but beneath it, the steel was hardening. "Now, your ID," Karen fumbled, her hands trembling as she reached into the deep pocket of her tracksuit. She pulled out a sleek leather wallet, her fingers clumsy as she extracted her driver's license. She shoved it towards Alex as if it were a burning coal. Alex took it, her movements precise. She scanned the photo, the name, Karen Denise Jenkins, and the address, verifying it, matched 432 Oakwood Lane. The date of birth confirmed her rough estimate of Karen's age. Alex noted it all down meticulously on her pad, along with the current time and the details of the dispatch. The act of documenting seemed to drain the last vestiges of Karen's defiance. She stood rigidly, her shoulders slumped, watching Alex's pen move across the paper. "So, Ms. Jenkins," Alex began, not looking up from her notepad, "you unequivocally state that the resident of 430 Oakwood Lane is creating excessive noise, shouting, and suspicious activity that constitutes a domestic disturbance?" I just meant they were being loud, Karen mumbled, her gaze fixed on the perfectly trimmed hydrangeas lining her porch. It's been constant, the deliveries, the car door slamming, and today, specifically, Alex pressed, her pen still. What domestic disturbance prompted a 911 call, Ms. Jenkins? And what suspicious activity did you witness that warranted emergency police response? Karen hesitated, clearly grasping for a lie, something plausible. But Alex's unwavering gaze, even from behind her sunglasses, felt like it stripped away any pretense. I heard noises, loud banging, and then shouting. I thought there was a fight or something. Alex slowly looked up from her notepad, her eyes boring into Karen's. Ms. Jenkins, I live alone. There was no banging, no shouting, and certainly no fight happening at my residence. My air conditioner was running. Are you certain you didn't mistake the sound of your own appliances, or perhaps a passing car, for a domestic disturbance? Karen's face flushed scarlet. I was concerned. For the neighborhood, it's my duty as a homeowner to report anything suspicious. Indeed, it is, Alex conceded, a hint of irony in her tone. But calling 911 for what appears to be a misidentified noise, or, more concerningly, a deliberate fabrication to harass a neighbor, is a different matter entirely. And as for suspicious activity, can you elaborate on what exactly led you to believe there was a crime occurring at 430 Oakwood Lane? Karen wrung her hands. Well, I don't see them much. And when I do, they're always in that uniform. It's just odd. Not like the other neighbors. Her voice grew bolder, a desperate attempt to shift the blame, to justify her actions. And they're always coming and going at strange hours. And the car, it's a police car. It brings down the property values. Alex felt a cold wave wash over her. It wasn't just the noise. It was her job, her uniform. Her very presence as a police officer in this neighborhood that was Karen's real issue. The suspicious activity was simply Alex existing. So your suspicion, Ms. Jenkins, is based on my profession and my work schedule? Alex asked, her voice dangerously quiet now. Karen seemed to shrink under the weight of Alex's gaze. Well, it's not normal. We like our peace and quiet here. We don't need activity. I am a police officer, Ms. Jenkins, Alex stated, her voice resonating with authority. My hours are unconventional. My vehicle is a marked police cruiser. This is my job. Are you suggesting that my lawful presence in my own home, going about my lawful duties, constitutes a domestic disturbance or suspicious activity? Karen was trapped. She stammered. No, of course not. I thought I was worried. Worried? About what? Precisely? Alex pressed, knowing the answer but needing it on record. Worried about the neighborhood, Karen finished lamely, avoiding Alex's gaze. Ms. Jenkins, Alex said, closing her notepad with a sharp snap. The sound reverberated in the sudden quiet. Based on my investigation, there is no evidence of a domestic disturbance or any suspicious activity at 430 Oakwood Lane. Your claims appear to be unsubstantiated. Furthermore, your comments indicate that your primary grievance is with my lawful presence and profession. Karen's face crumpled. You can't do anything. This is ridiculous. I'm going to call your supervisor. I'm going to sue you. You're certainly welcome to file a complaint, Ms. Jenkins, Alex replied, her voice unwavering. However, I will be filing my report detailing your 911 call, the unsubstantiated claims, and the potential charge of false reporting to emergency services, which carries a misdemeanor charge in this state. I will also include details of your repeated non-emergency complaints regarding my property, which could be indicative of harassment. She paused, letting the words sink in. Karen was visibly shaking now. Furthermore, Alex continued, her gaze sweeping over Karen's porch. "I will be documenting that this call took an officer off the street, diverting resources that could have been used for genuine emergencies. This is not a trivial matter, Ms. Jenkins." "No," Karen cried, finally finding a desperate, pleading tone. "Please don't. I didn't mean... I don't like change. This neighborhood has always been quiet." "Change happens, Ms. Jenkins," Alex said, a cold edge to her voice, "and my presence here is entirely lawful. Your attempts to weaponize 911 and use it as a tool for neighborly disputes are not. I'm issuing you a warning for this instance of false reporting. Any further unsubstantiated 911 calls regarding my property or any other property that ties up emergency services unnecessarily will result in immediate charges being filed. Is that understood?" Karen nodded, her head bobbing frantically, tears beginning to well in her eyes. The righteous indignation was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror of consequences. Yes, officer, I understand. I won't, I promise." Alex watched her for a moment, letting the silence stretch, the weight of her uniform and her authority pressing down on the shaking woman. "Good. Now, I need to complete my report. I'll be over at my residence for a few minutes if you have anything further to add that is actually relevant to a criminal investigation." She turned, a slow, deliberate movement, and walked off Karen's porch, leaving the woman standing alone, exposed, her world having just imploded around her. Alex walked towards her own house, pulled out her keys, and unlocked the front door. She stepped inside, the cool air of her home a welcome balm against the heat of the afternoon and the intensity of the confrontation. From her front window, unseen by Karen, Alex watched as Karen slowly, hesitantly, retreated back into her own house. The heavy oak door swung shut, muffling the sound of what Alex imagined was a furious, frustrated breakdown. Alex leaned against the cool wall of her living room, letting out a long, slow breath. The adrenaline, which had been simmering beneath the surface, began to dissipate, leaving her feeling hollowed out, but also, strangely, vindicated. 6 months of passive-aggressive notes, pointed glares, and vague complaints had finally culminated in this. And Alex had handled it, professionally, by the book. And Karen had, for the first time, faced immediate, undeniable consequences. She pulled out her phone, opened her department's reporting app, and began typing. Every detail, every word Karen had said, the false accusations, the implied prejudice, the clear abuse of emergency services. This report wouldn't just be a formality, it would be a permanent record. A warning shot fired loud and clear. As she finished the initial draft of the report, detailing Karen's full name and address, the time of dispatch, the false nature of the complaint, and the warning issued, Alex allowed herself a small, grim smile. Karen had thought she could weaponize the system against her. She hadn't realized that the system had just turned around and stared her down. The balance of power on Oakwood Lane had irrevocably shifted. The queen of the neighborhood had just met the law, and the law lived next door. The phone in her hand buzzed. It was a text from Sergeant Davies, her direct supervisor. "How was the domestic disturbance at your place, Miller?" Dispatch said Karen Jenkins called it in. The digital reverberation of Alex's text to Sergeant Davies felt heavier than any physical weight. It was done. The report, meticulously detailed and unflinchingly honest, was now in the system. Alex spent the rest of her shift on autopilot, responding to petty theft calls and mediating a minor fender bender, but her mind kept replaying Karen's ashen face. There was a sense of grim satisfaction, but also a lingering unease. She knew this wouldn't be the end of it. Karen Jenkins wasn't the type to simply retreat. The next morning, the unease solidified. Walking into the precinct, Alex felt eyes on her. It wasn't overt, no whispers, Just the subtle shift in glances from her colleagues in the bullpen, a few prolonged stares over coffee cups. Sergeant Davies, a man whose default setting was gruff pragmatism, called her into his office immediately. His office was sparse, dominated by a large whiteboard covered in rotating duty rosters and case numbers. Davies sat behind his metal desk, leaning back in his chair, a half-eaten donut forgotten on a napkin. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Miller, have a seat." Alex sat, her spine straight. "Sergeant." Davies pushed a tablet across the desk. Alex saw her report displayed on the screen, her own words staring back at her. "So," Davies began, his voice flat, devoid of its usual sarcastic bite. "Karen Jenkins, known to dispatch. Multiple low-level nuisance calls. But this is a new one." He picked up the donut, took a bite, chewed slowly. "You're saying she called 911 on you, on your own house, and the issue was your uniform and your work schedule?" "That's correct, Sergeant," Alex confirmed. "She explicitly stated that my presence, as a police officer, brought down property values and was not normal for the neighborhood. She fabricated a domestic disturbance as a pretext to have me removed." Davies sighed, a long, weary sound. "She's claiming harassment, said you intimidated her, used your position to threaten her." Alex felt a surge of cold anger. "That's a lie. I followed every protocol. I identified myself, confirmed the nature of her call, and calmly explained the legal ramifications of false reporting and harassment. I issued a verbal warning, as per standard procedure." "I know, Miller," Davies said, holding up a hand. "I'm not accusing you. Just telling you what's being said. Her nephew's a lawyer downtown, young hotshot. Called the station this morning, already threatening a formal complaint. With internal affairs. Claims police misconduct, abuse of power, targeting an innocent civilian." A knot tightened in Alex's stomach. Internal affairs. This was going to be messy. "Sergeant, I documented everything. My body cam was on. Every word she said, every lie, every prejudiced statement. It's all recorded." Davies nodded slowly. "Good. That's good. Look, Miller, this is unfortunate. It puts you in a difficult position, obviously. Being hassled by a neighbor is one thing. Being hassled by a neighbor who then tries to turn it into an IA complaint is another. Keep your head down. Don't engage with her off duty. If she approaches, you ignore her. If she does anything else that constitutes harassment, report it immediately. We'll handle the IA complaint. Standard procedure. Review the body cam, interview you, interview her. It'll be a headache, but we'll get through it." "Understood, Sergeant," Alex said, relieved Davies was backing her. But the headache part was accurate. This was exactly what she'd moved to Maple Creek to avoid. Meanwhile, Karen Jenkins was in a state of barely controlled hysteria. The incident had rocked her meticulously ordered world. The officer, her neighbor, had humiliated her, threatened her, and now, she was certain, was actively plotting against her. She had indeed called her nephew Bradley, a slick, ambitious lawyer fresh out of law school, who had puffed up with indignation at the perceived injustice against his beloved aunt. He'd promised to handle it. But even Bradley's confident words couldn't quell the rising panic in Karen. The very idea that she, Karen Jenkins, the doyenne of Oakwood Lane, could face legal charges for merely calling 911 on a disruptive neighbor was an affront to her entire existence. Her immediate reaction was to rally support. She called her closest friends on the street, Margaret, the retired school teacher who kept her roses impeccable, and Beverly, the perpetually gossiping matriarch of the cul-de-sac. "You won't believe what happened!" Karen gasped into the phone. To Margaret, her voice hoarse, thick with self-pity. That woman next door, the police officer. She harassed me, threatened me with jail time for calling 911, all because she's angry I reported her." Margaret, ever cautious, listened patiently. Karen, dear, are you sure there wasn't a misunderstanding? Officer Miller seems like a very quiet person. Quiet! Karen shrieked. She's a menace, and now she's using her badge to intimidate me. This neighborhood is going to ruin. We need to do something. She shouldn't be allowed to live here. Margaret made vague, non-committal noises, something Karen usually dismissed as Margaret being too meek. Beverly, however, was a different story. A police officer living next door, and she threatened you? Oh, Karen, this is juicy. I always said that woman was a bit off. Too quiet, never joins the book club. What did she threaten you with? Emboldened by Beverly's apparent outrage, Karen elaborated, embellishing details, painting Alex as an aggressive, power-abusing tyrant. She said she'd have me arrested for calling 911. Can you believe the audacity? Beverly clucked her tongue. This is simply unacceptable. We need to have a meeting. The Homeowners Association needs to hear about this. She's clearly a danger to our community values. Karen latched onto the idea. A meeting, a petition. The collective power of Oakwood Lane would surely set things right. She could feel her righteous indignation returning, pushing back the fear. She wouldn't just sit there and be a victim. She would fight back. A few days later, the neighborhood grapevine, usually a slow-moving river of mild gossip, turned into a raging torrent. Rumors flew, distorted and exaggerated with each retelling. The new officer threatened to arrest Karen for looking at her funny. She's a corrupt cop, using her badge to bully innocent citizens. There's an internal affairs investigation happening on our street. Alex heard the whispers, too, at the grocery store, from the mailman, even from other officers who lived in Maple Creek but in different sections. It was unsettling, infuriating. She knew the truth would come out, but the immediate smear campaign was a heavy burden. Then came the first concrete action. A flyer anonymously slipped under her door and under the doors of every house on Oakwood Lane. It was poorly printed, but the message was clear. A hastily written accusation of unprofessional conduct and neighborly harassment by Officer A. Miller, urging residents to attend an urgent community meeting at Karen Jenkins' house that Saturday to discuss safety and property value concerns. Alex picked up the flyer, her fingers tightening around the cheap paper. A community meeting. A public forum for Karen to air her grievances, spread her lies, and whip up a mob. This wasn't just a phone call anymore. This was a declaration of war. She looked at her front door, then across to Karen's immaculate house, where a new professionally printed sign had appeared on the lawn. Neighborhood Watch Meeting, Saturday 2 p.m., all welcome. Alex knew she had to go. Not as Officer Miller, but as Alex Miller, the homeowner, to confront the lies head-on, to defend her name, her home, her very right to exist in this quiet neighborhood. The internal affairs investigation was one thing. A public crucifixion by a self-appointed neighborhood queen was another. This wasn't just about a 911 call anymore. It was about her reputation, her future, and whether she could ever truly find peace in Maple Creek. The flyer, unassuming in its simplicity, was the gauntlet thrown down. Alex knew that the meeting on Saturday wouldn't just be about community concerns. It would be a public trial orchestrated by Karen. And for the first time since she'd moved to Maple Creek, Alex felt not just anger, but a deep, cold resolve. She would face Karen, and she would win. The air in Karen Jenkins's meticulously decorated living room was thick with unspoken anticipation, a simmering tension that had nothing to do with the humid August evening outside. Every seat was filled, from the floral chintz armchairs to the dining room chairs pulled into a makeshift semicircle. About 15 residents of Oakwood Lane were present. A mix of curious onlookers, staunch Karen loyalists, and a few genuinely concerned neighbors like Margaret, who sat nervously clutching her handbag. At precisely 2 p.m., Karen swept into the room from the kitchen, a teacup clutched in her hand. her expression a practiced blend of sorrow and righteous indignation. She wore a sensible navy blue dress, accessorized with a string of pearls, designed to convey a sense of solemn sincerity. Her nephew, Bradley, sat beside her, radiating youthful confidence in a sharp, if slightly too snug, suit. Alex Miller arrived 5 minutes late, a deliberate choice. She walked in quietly, dressed in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a simple, navy blue polo shirt, her off-duty presence an intentional contrast to the official uniform. She surveyed the room, her gaze sweeping over the faces, some averted, some openly curious, a few hostile. She found a spot near the back, leaning against the wall, observing a silent sentinel. Karen cleared her throat dramatically, drawing all eyes to her. Thank you all for coming. As you know, our beautiful, peaceful community has been disturbed of late. She cast a pointed, venomous glance at Alex, who remained impassive. I called this meeting because I believe we face a serious threat to our property values and, more importantly, our sense of safety and well-being. She launched into her rehearsed narrative, painting a vivid, exaggerated picture of the harassment she'd endured. She spoke of constant noise, suspicious comings and goings, and the unsettling presence of a police vehicle disrupting the neighborhood's tranquility. Her voice trembled with feigned emotion as she described the 911 call, twisting the facts, to portray herself as a victim threatened by an abusive officer who had demanded her ID and threatened her with jail time for a simple concern. "This officer," Karen declared, her voice rising to a crescendo, "who, as you know, lives right next door to me, is using her badge to intimidate law-abiding citizens. This is police misconduct. It's an abuse of power, and it cannot be tolerated. In our community," a murmur went through the room. Beverly nodded vigorously, her eyes glinting with self-importance. A few others looked uneasy, exchanging uncertain glances. Bradley then rose, stepping forward with the practiced ease of a young lawyer. "Ladies and gentlemen, my aunt has suffered greatly. We have already initiated a formal complaint with the Police Department's Internal Affairs Division. We believe Officer Miller's conduct was entirely unprofessional and out of line. We are here today to gather your support, to show the department that this is not just one woman's complaint, but a community's concern. We aim to have this officer transferred, if not removed from the force entirely." The words hung in the air, audacious and damning. Alex remained still, her expression unreadable. She let them speak, let them reveal the full extent of their calculated attack. When Bradley finished, a few residents voiced their agreement, swayed by Karen's performance. "It is unsettling," one man offered. "Property values are important." Then Margaret, the cautious neighbor, spoke up, her voice surprisingly firm. "Karen, with all due respect, I've seen Officer Miller come and go. She's always polite. I haven't heard any unusual noise. Are we sure this isn't a misunderstanding?" Karen shot Margaret a frosty glare. "There's no misunderstanding, Margaret. This is about principle, about protecting our way of life." Principle, indeed. A clear, calm voice cut through the rising clamor. All heads turned. Alex stepped forward, moving from the back wall, her presence suddenly commanding the room. Karen's eyes widened, a flicker of panic returning to them. You're not invited. This is a private meeting." "On the contrary, Ms. Jenkins," Alex said, her voice steady and resonant, carrying easily across the room. "Your flyer stated, 'Urgent Community Meeting. All welcome.' I am a member of this community, and as the subject of your defamatory remarks, I believe I have every right to be here, especially when false accusations are being made." She paused, letting the silence build. Her gaze swept over the faces in the room, making eye contact with many of them. "My name is Alex Miller. I am a police officer with the Maple Creek Police Department, and I am your neighbor at 430 Oakwood Lane, and I would like to set the record straight." Bradley stepped forward, a smug look on his face. "Officer Miller, you are under investigation. Any statements you make here could be used against you." "Thank you for the legal advice, counselor," Alex replied, a hint of steel in her tone. "However, I am speaking as a private citizen today, defending my reputation against baseless attacks. You mentioned an internal affairs complaint. You are correct. There is one. And as part of that complaint, every officer's body camera footage of the incident is reviewed." Mine was on. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Karen's face, already pale, turned an alarming shade of white. Bradley's confident smirk vanished, replaced by a look of dawning horror. "My body camera," Alex continued, her voice gaining momentum, "recorded every single word of my interaction with Ms. Jenkins on her porch. It will show that I responded professionally to a 911 call that alleged a domestic disturbance and suspicious activity at my own home. It will show Ms. Jenkins making unsubstantiated claims and then explicitly stating her issue was with my uniform and my profession, and her desire to have me removed from the neighborhood. It will show me calmly explaining the law regarding false reporting and harassment and issuing a verbal warning." She looked directly at Karen, her gaze unwavering. "There was no shouting, no threats, no intimidation on my part, only professional conduct in the face of a frivolous and potentially malicious emergency call." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of an air conditioner. The narrative Karen had so carefully constructed was crumbling before their eyes. The image of Alex as a quiet, unassuming neighbor was replaced by one of a calm, authoritative professional. "I welcome the internal affairs investigation," Alex stated, her voice resonating with conviction, "because the truth, as captured on that body camera, will speak for itself, and it will clearly show who was harassing whom." Karen tried to speak, but her voice was a strangled whisper. That's not true. You manipulated it. The footage speaks for itself, Ms. Jenkins," Alex interjected, her voice firm. "And it will become part of the public record during the investigation, accessible to anyone who cares to verify the facts." Bradley, looking visibly shaken, put a hand on Karen's arm. "Aunt Karen, perhaps we should—" Alex didn't wait for him to finish. She looked at the assembled neighbors. "I moved to Oakwood Lane for peace and quiet, just like you. I respect this community, but I will not stand by and allow myself or my profession to be slandered by false accusations and prejudice. I am a law-abiding citizen, and I am here to stay." She scanned the faces one last time. Many of the hostile expressions had softened into genuine curiosity or even a hint of respect. Beverly, the gossip queen, looked utterly deflated, her plans for juicy stories having evaporated. Margaret gave Alex a small, knowing nod. The tide had turned. Karen's public trial had just become her public humiliation. Alex took a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders easing. She had faced them, head on. She had spoken her truth, backed by irrefutable evidence. And in that moment, in Karen's own living room, the power shifted irrevocably. Karen Jenkins was no longer the queen of Oakwood Lane. She was just a woman who had called 911 on a cop and been caught in her own lie. The aftermath of the community meeting was a swift and brutal reckoning for Karen Jenkins. The carefully constructed social order of Oakwood Lane, once so firmly under her thumb, fractured and crumbled around her. The silence that followed Alex's departure from Karen's living room wasn't just shock. It was the quiet, damning verdict of a neighborhood. Beverly, the gossip queen, looked utterly crestfallen, her primary source of sensational material having just discredited herself. Margaret, after a moment, simply rose and quietly left, a look of profound disappointment on her face. One by one, the other neighbors dispersed, some offering mumbled apologies to Karen on their way out, others avoiding her gaze entirely. Karen, stood amidst the debris of her shattered reputation, the perfectly arranged furniture now seeming to mock her. Her nephew, Bradley, who had initially puffed with legal indignation, now just looked sheepish, his confident facade dissolved. "Aunt Karen," he started, his voice hushed. "The body cam footage, that changes everything. My firm won't pursue a case if it's a clear case of false reporting. It'll backfire." His words were a blunt instrument, shattering her last shred of hope for legal vindication. Meanwhile, for Alex, the following weeks were a slow, steady climb out of the shadows. The internal affairs investigation, while a bureaucratic headache, played out exactly as she had predicted. Sergeant Davies informed her, a week after the meeting, that the complaint was unfounded. "Body cam footage was clear, Miller," Davies, stated, his eyes fixed on hers. "Showed you handled it by the book. Ms. Jenkins' claims of intimidation were baseless. Frivolous call. We've decided not to pursue charges against her at this time, given it was a verbal warning and her first documented false 911 report. However, it's on record, and any future incidents will be met with full legal action. Understood?" "Understood, Sergeant," Alex replied, a sense of quiet relief washing over her. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting her integrity and ensuring this wouldn't happen again. The shift in the neighborhood was palpable. The cold shoulders and averted glances from before transformed into tentative smiles and friendly waves. Margaret, the cautious neighbor, brought over a plate of homemade cookies one evening, offering a quiet, sincere apology for the unpleasantness. Other neighbors started to genuinely engage, stopping to chat when Alex was getting her mail, or offering a quick wave as she pulled out for her shift. She was no longer just the new one or the cop. She was Alex, a respected member of the community. Karen, on the other hand, found herself in a self-imposed exile. Her perfectly manicured lawn, once a gathering spot for spontaneous neighborhood, chats, became a deserted island. No one stopped to chat. No one waved. Her calls to Beverly often went unanswered, or were met with curt excuses. The ladies' weekly bridge game, a highlight of her social calendar, quietly ceased inviting her. The once vibrant social hub of 432 Oakwood Lane became a silent, lonely monument to her own misguided actions. She tried, at first, to maintain her air of aggrieved dignity, but the silent ostracism chipped away at her. She would see Alex driving by in her patrol car or simply watering her plants, and the familiar surge of resentment would be quickly overridden by a crushing wave of humiliation. The police car, once a symbol she abhorred, now served as a constant, stark reminder of her colossal error. One humid afternoon, several months later, Alex was tending to her small herb garden in the front yard. She saw Karen's curtains twitch, a familiar, furtive movement. Alex didn't react, simply continued to prune her basil. A few minutes later, she heard a faint cough. She looked up. Karen stood awkwardly on her own porch, holding a small, wilting bouquet of hydrangeas, perhaps from her own garden. Her hair was still perfectly coiffed, but her shoulders were slumped, and her face, usually contorted with indignation, was etched with a raw, undeniable shame. "Officer." "Alex," Karen began, her voice barely a whisper, devoid of its usual shrillness. She looked like a shadow of her former self. I wanted to apologize for everything." She held out the hydrangeas, her hand trembling slightly. I was wrong. About you. About everything. I'm sorry." Alex stood up, brushing dirt from her hands. She looked at the bouquet, then at Karen's defeated face. The apology, though long overdue, felt genuine. It wasn't the triumphant victory she might have once craved, but something far more meaningful, a recognition of fault, a flicker of humility. "Apology accepted, Karen," Alex said, her voice soft but firm. She didn't take the flowers. The gesture, while significant, didn't erase months of harassment. But it opened the door, just a crack, to a new, unspoken understanding. Karen simply nodded, her eyes glistening. She placed the hydrangeas carefully on her own porch railing and slowly retreated back into her house, the door clicking shut behind her. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't filled with tension or animosity, but with a quiet, fragile truce. Alex returned to her herbs, a slight smile finally gracing her lips. The peace she had sought in Maple Creek, the quiet anonymity, was finally within reach. It hadn't come easy. She had faced down prejudice, false accusations, and the wrath of a self-appointed neighborhood queen. But she had done it with integrity, with professionalism, and by simply being herself. The cop who answered her own 911 call had not only brought justice, but, in doing so, had finally found her home.